Today's our topic is decline of medieval socio-political, religious, economic conditions. A second chance in the European economy was the development of the guild. A guild was an organization of individuals in the same business or occupation working to improve the economic and social conditions of its members. The first guilds were merchant guilds. Merchants banded together to control the number of goods being traded and to keep prices up. They also provided security in trading and reduced losses. About the same time, skilled artisans and such as wheelwrights, glassmakers, winemakers, tailors, and druggists being craft guilds. In most craft, both husband and wife work at the family trade. In a few crafts, especially for cloth making, women form the majority. The guild set standard for a quality of work, wages, and working conditions. For example, bakers were required to sell loaves of bread of a standard size and weight. The guilds also created plans for supervised training of new workers, artisans, and craftspeople were manufacturing goods by hand for local and long distance trade. More and better products were now available to buyers in small towns, in bigger cities, and at trade fairs. Guilds become powerful forces in the medieval economy. The wealth they accumulated helped them establish influence over the government and the economy of towns and cities. Summarizing, how did guilds change the way business was conducted and products made? Surnames, many people can trace their last names or surnames back to medieval occupation in Europe. The name Smith, for example, refers to someone who smiths or work metal. The surname silversmith would belong to a person who worked silver. In German speaking areas, a smith was named Silberschmied. Someone who made goods out of wood was often surnamed carpenter. In French speaking areas, a carpenter was called charpentier, while in German areas, the same persons would be called Zimmermann. The last name of Bullinger dictated a baker in France. A baker in Germany often had the surname Bicker. Craft guilds form an important part of town life during the medieval period. They trained young people in a skilled job, regulated the quality of goods sold, and were major forces in community life. Next topic, commercial revolution. Just as agriculture was expanding and craftsmiths changing, so were trade and finance, increased ability of trade goods and new ways of doing business changed life in Europe. Taken together, this expansion of trade and business is called the commercial revolution. Fairs and trades. Most trade took place in towns. Peasants from nearby manors traveled to town on fair days, hauling items to trade. Great fairs were held several times a year, usually during religious festivals when many people would be in town. People visited the stall sets by merchants from all parts of Europe. Clothes was the most common trade item. Other items included bacon, salt, honey, cheese, wine, leather, dyes, knives, and ropes. Such local markets met all the needs of daily life for a small community. No longer was everything produced on a self sufficient manner. More goods from foreign lands became available. Trade routes spread across Europe from Flanders to Italy. Italian merchants shipped travels the Mediterranean to ports in Byzantium, such as Constantinople. They also traveled to Muslim ports along the North African coast. Trade routes were opened to Asia in part by the Crusades. Increased business at markets and fewer made merchants willing to take chance on buying merchandise that they call sale at profit. Merchants then reinvested the profits in more goods. Businesses and banking as trader moved from fair to fair. They needed large amount of cash or credit and wished to exchange many types of currencies. Enterprises merchants found ways to solve these problems. For example, bill of exchange stabilized exchange rate between different coinage systems. Letter of credit between merchants eliminated the need to carry large amounts of cash and made trading easier. Trading firms and associations formed to offer these services to their groups. Merchants looked for new markets and opportunity to make a profit. Merchants first had to purchase goods from distant places. To do so that they had to borrow money, but the church forbade Christians from lending money at interest as seen called usury. So money lending and banking became the occupation of many European Jews. Over time, the church relaxed its rule on usury and Christians entered the banking business. Banking became an important business, especially in Italy. Society change, the change brought about by the commercial revolution were slow, yet they had a major effect on the lives of Europeans. As you can see in the diagram, increased trade brought many changes to aspects of society. Two of the most important changes involved what people did it to earn a living and where they lived. As town attracted workers, the town grew into cities. Life in the cities was different from life in the sleepy villages or manors. Now, next topic urban line flourishes. Scholars estimated that between 1000 and 1150, the population of Western Europe rose from around 300 million to about 42 million. Towns grew and flourished compared to great cities like Constantinople. European towns were unsophisticated and tiny. Europe's largest city, Paris, probably had no more than 60,000 people there by the year 1200. A typical town in medieval Europe had only about 1,500 to 400 2,500 people. Even so, the small communities become a powerful force for change in Europe. Now, next topic is trade and towns grow together. By the later Middle Age, trade was the very lifeblood of the new towns which sprung up at the ports and crossroads on hilltops and along rivers. As trade grew, towns all over Europe swelled with people. The excitement and bustle of towns drew many people. But there were some drawbacks to living in a medieval town. Streets were narrow filled with animals and their waste. With no sewers, most people dumped household and human waste into the commercial revolution and lending service available more money available for building businesses, merchant wealth and power, expand increased trade needed workers, paid for labor, merchants tax increased the king power and wealth drawing conclusions. Street in front of the house, most of the people never bathed and their house lacked fresh air, light and clean water. Because houses were built of wood with thatched roofs, they were a constant fire hazard. Nonetheless, many people chose to move to town to pursue the economic and social opportunity they offered. People were no longer content with their old feudal existence on manors or in tiny villages. Even though legally bound to their lord's manor, many serfs ran away. According to customs, a serf could now become free by living within a town for a year and a day. A saying of the time went, "Town air make you free." Many of these runaway serfs, now free people, made better life for themselves in towns. Next topic is merchant class shifts the social orders. The merchants and craftspeople of medieval towns did not fit into the traditional medieval social order of noble, clergy, and peasants at first time. Town came under the authority of feudal lords who used their authority to levy fees, taxes, and rents. As trade expanded, the burghers of merchants class town sailors, jewelers resented this interference in their trade and commerce. They organized themselves and demanding privileges. This include freedom from certain kinds of tools and the right to govern the town. At times they fought against their landlords and won these rights by force. Next topic, the revival of learning. During the Crusades, European contact with Muslims and Byzantines greatly expanded. This content brought a new interest in learning, especially in the works of Greek philosophers. The Muslims and Byzantine library housed copies of this writing. Most has disappeared during the century following the fall of Rome and the inventions of Western Europe. Next topic, Muslim collects connection. In the 1100s, Christian scholars from Europe began visiting Muslim libraries in Spain. Few Western scholars knew Greek, but most did know Latin. So Jewish scholars living in Spain translated the Arabic versions of works by Aristotle and the other Greek writers into Latin. All at once, Europeans acquired a huge new body of language. This included science, philosophy, law, mathematics, and other fields. In addition, the Crusades brought back to Europe superior Muslim technology in ship, navigations, and weapons. Next topic, scholars and the university. At the center of the growth learning stood a new European institution, the university. The word university originally referred to a group of scholars meeting wherever they could. People note buildings made up the medieval university. University arose at Paris and at Bologna, Italy by the end of 1100 century. Other followed at the English town of Oxford and the Salerno, Italy. Most students were the son of burghers or well-to-do artisans. For most students, the goal was a job in government of the church. Earning a bachelor's degree in theology might take 5 to 7 years in school. Becoming a master of theology took at least 12 years of student. New ideas and form of expression began to flow out of the university. At a time when serious scholars and writing were writing in Latin, a few remarkable poets began using a lively vernacular or the everyday language of their homeland. He was a Persian philosopher, astronomer, poet, and physician. His book, The Cure and Interpretations of Aristotle's Philosophy, greatly affected Western thought. This work, translated into Latin, influenced the scholarly Dante Alighieri wrote the Divine Comedy, 1382 1314 in Italian. Geoffrey Chaucer wrote the Canterbury Tales about 3082 4000 in English. Christian de Pizan wrote the Book of the City of Ladies 1405 in French. Since most people could not read or understand Latin, this work written in vernacular brought literature to many people. Next topic is Aquinas and medieval philosophy. Christian scholars were excited by the ideas of Greek philosopher. They wonder if a Christian scholar could use this tautological approach to truth and still keep faith with the Bible. In the mid 1200s, scholar Thomas Aquinas argued that the most basic religious truth could be proved by logical argument. But between 1267 and 1273, Aquinas wrote the Summa Theologia. Aquinas' great work, influenced by Aristotle, combined ancient Greek thought with the Christian thought of this time. Aquinas and his fellow scholars who met at great university were known as schoolmen or scholastics. The scholastics used their knowledge of Aristotle to debate many issues of their time. Their teachings on law and government influenced the thinking of Western Europe, particularly the English and French. Accordingly, they began to develop democratic institutions and traditions. Next topic is characteristic features of Renaissance. The word Renaissance means rebirth, following the Dark and Middle Age and their associated turmoil and stagnations. Not to mention the Black Death, Europe experienced a rebirth of sorts with the discovery of math, philosophy, astrology, astronomy, science and literature and art witnesses a great revival within the 200 years. From 1400 to 1600, with the advent of the printing press, knowledge was the first time in over 1,000 years accessible to people outside of the clergy, the noble, aristocratic, and the royal. Renaissance brought about the several changes, and these are the changes are still influencing the modern people even up till presently. But the Germans, among its effect was the effect of the time it uses the word into a phase of heightened spiritual thinking, a phase of the people begin to explore the philosophy of humanism. Special attention was given to the classical eras in Greek and in Rome, which until the Renaissance were the pinnacles of human achievement. Next topic Renaissance art, a period of revival and creativity. A renewed passion for learning and for human achievement led to the influence of all these of the new studies in the formation of greater art. Renaissance was a period of greater learning and curiosity which led many learners and artists to develop or engage in a new forms of art. Renaissance brought about several changes, and these are the changes that are still influencing the modern world even up into presently. But the Germany among its effect was the fact or that the time it uses the world into a phase of heightened spiritual thinking, a phase where people begin to explore the philosophy of humanism. Florence, Italy was the birthplace of Renaissance, and that is the reason why many disciplines focus mainly on Italy. The power of humanists during the Renaissance period was dominating, and thus the church sought it to the become patron of the artist projects. The creative ventures involving the church and the artists suit up due to higher education sponsored by the church and the wealthy merchants spending huge amount of money on the paintings. Renaissance art was instrumental in the change the world experienced. Below are five of the characteristics of Renaissance art that had a major influence on the world. Next, we discuss about top 5 characteristics of Renaissance art that changed the world. The first one is a positive willingness to learn and explore. The one set of technology and new discovery led artisans and the learners to seek more. While the Western and world saw as stimulations, discovery, and innovations, the artists in Italy become more and more curious to explore the world and all the possible aspects of nature. The discovery in Europe included new sea era route, continents, and colonies, along with new innovation in architecture, sculpting, and painting. They believed the revival of the classical antiquity could lead to much worthy and standardized stake in that era. The second one is faith in the nobility of man, humanism. Prior to Renaissance was the Renaissance humanism which contribute immensely to the rise of Renaissance. Note that Renaissance humanism is not the same as humanism. Humanism was a major offshoot, the characteristic of the Renaissance period, while the Renaissance humanism was an intellectual movement that began in 13th century. The major deal of philosophy was tied around the study of classical texts and the alternation of these classical thinkings by more contemporary ones. As in the 5th century, Renaissance humanism had become the dominant form of education. It was so popular that it was divided into a range of sub developments. Francisco Petrarch 1304 230-74 in regarded as the father of Italian humanism. His contribution to the philosophy was quite huge. Renaissance humanism was very instrumental to the reason of the Renaissance. It was popular and predominant during the period. This was the two extents that the church had to support and even patronate. Through humanism, art spatially enjoy the support of the church.